Hello, Evergreen 4th grade teachers, and welcome to your ELA Data Day. I'm your presenter. My name is Rayellen Merritt, and I've had the privilege of teaching 3rd grade for the last 4 years. Throughout those 4 years, I've had the opportunity to gain knowledge with understanding literacy. And like most, my passion is helping students grow. So many may wonder, why are we here? Well, we're here to analyze and interpret our data for our school, our teachers, and our students. We want to collaborate throughout the department to advise best practices, to inform classroom instruction, and most importantly, to cast a vision for the future. I want to note that we want to use this data as a whole holistic approach to the information we are going to look at today. Meaning, we are not going to get too hung up with one specific data point. We only want to talk about what we are seeing as a whole picture, as well as what we are seeing in the classroom. It's important to understand that any data we collect is a snapshot in time. And we also need to trust the educators with their thoughts and ideas and what they notice. We want to make sure we acknowledge that and that we use this information to guide us to our next step, especially in regards to what it looks like. What are we seeing? What gaps are there? How can we address those gaps? How are we currently trying to address them? And what can we do moving forward? Now, down to the business. Well, we absolutely are going to celebrate what we are doing well. We want to talk about why it's going well and how we're doing it, what resources we're doing to help promote that, and also how do we continue to make strides in that direction. But then we also are going to look at our area of improvement. We are going to decide, what is the issue? What are we lacking? Is it a curriculum issue? Is it resources? Professional learning? What exactly are we missing when it comes to that particular skill? Then, how are we going to attack it? What's going to be our plan? We want to make sure that we are collaborative together, especially the eye on the prize. We want to make sure we are solution-based in our discussions. I know that it can be easy to fall down the hole of complaining and feeling very negative. And there's definitely a time and a place for that. But we need to stay solution-focused, so at the end of the day, we have a solid plan for moving forward and what's going to be best for our district, ourselves, but most importantly, what's going to be best for our kids. I gave you all a packet when you walked in. Within this packet is our district data. The first page looks like the one that's on my screen. This page is the reading diagnostic assessment. So this is going to show us how our kids did on that particular day with that diagnostics assessment. This is a reading one. The green indicates students who are or above the benchmark of what the test companies set. The yellow are the ones that are below the benchmark. The really great thing that comes out of this here, though, is we are scoring above 50% in the most of our grades for reading. But what we are noticing too is if you look at the data, we are also seeing data increase a little bit as the grade levels go up. We started at 59% with proficiency in first grade. Then we kind of see a little bit of a decline. We go to 55%, 56% again, and then 52%. So is there something we need to look at? In terms of resources, is there something we are noticing with our kids as we move forward? This is the kind of conversation that we need to have today. It's a good indicator to see how kids might do on the test. It also allows us to translate and help give us a little bit more information for moving forward. It's not a lot. It doesn't give us a little, and it doesn't let us drill deep into it, but it gives us that idea for starters, so then we can look at other data. With that being said, we want to take a step further and we want to look at our state testing reports. Go ahead and take a look at the next page in your packet. I'm going to give you a moment just to notice what you see throughout the domains and throughout the color-coded. This is going to give us a nice overview of the state average. And then the average of the 3 elementary schools. A quick little note just to make sure everyone understands what the colors mean at the bottom. Red means below proficiency. The yellow means that they're near or at proficient. And the blue is above proficient. What's kind of tricky about this is unfortunately the state doesn't say what the at or near proficient is. It also doesn't give us that great continuum of whether they are at or near it. If you're near proficient, you're still not a proficient, right? So how close are we? They don't give us that, so these are a little bit of ambitious for when it comes to the type of data because it doesn't always tell us everything we need. However, when we piece together the several reports and the release test items that the state does give us, we could maybe start to get a clear picture. So let's break it apart. At the very top, you will see the state average. Here, we can see that the state average score is a 715. With that, 65% of fourth graders in the state of Ohio were considered to be proficient. Then you could see over in the very 2 columns, it talks about our reading domains, which is reading informational text, reading literary text, and writing. So we are able to sort of kind of see where everything is shaken out to be. I usually like to focus on the 2 outliers, those that are below proficient and those that are above proficient. So if we look at those numbers, it's helpful to see right around where we are with being proficient in all 3 domains. But we also can see a decrease in those that are above proficiency when it comes to literary text. Right below that is the Ohio scores compared to the Evergreen School District scores. Again, we are on par, slightly above the state data. We're not too far off. We're right on par with it. Go ahead and just compare us to that. Just for a second, take a look at that. So now, to drill down a little bit further and take a look at our 3 individual schools. I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes to get together and take a look at this information. I want you to look at what areas we may need to improve, what questions you may have for me as a supporting staff. Maybe I can do a little bit of research to help figure out, or is there any questions you may have from this information that you feel will be worth us talking about in the end during collaboration time? Go ahead and take that 15 minutes just to dig deep and think about those questions that you may have. Hone in on your specific school. Compare yourself to those other schools. What questions could you come up with? I'm going to be walking around the room, And if you have any questions so far to ask me, feel free to reach out. Then we can look at this as a whole. So let's bring it all back together. We can look and see what these results might tell us. If we are looking at all of our schools, we can say that reading literary text is the lowest data point for the SCID scoring above proficient. Again, we are looking at the blue column. So as a district, I think that this could be the area of focus for us because there's still some kids in that yellow who are not in proficiency within that domain. We're going to take some time to check out the standards of the released scores, but before we do that, I would like to give you guys a 10-minute break to stretch your legs, use the restroom, maybe ask those questions if you saw me busy with up here a little bit ago. If you want to catch me and ask me those questions you do have so far, take that time to do that, please. And we will come back together in 10 minutes after our 10-minute break. Welcome back. Now we are going to dig into the Ohio State scores and what the released information looked like. And also, what does it tell us? We are going to try to figure out what have our students mastered? What do they struggle with? What trends are you seeing? And if possible, what are we doing for our individual learners? We can take a look at this now and see how they performed on the test, and maybe it will give us some further information. Or maybe it'll tell us we need additional enrichment for our gifted and higher level students. Do we need additional interventions for our struggling students? And how is our curriculum looking for our grade level kids? Do we have everything necessary for those kids? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves, and we're going to be seeking as the information is delivered to us. I want you to flip to the next page, and you're going to see that I color-coded this page for you. So this graphic, I like it because this is the best the state gives us for the item analysis. So basically what the state gives us is the test question, the number, and the content that was addressed to that question. It doesn't give us the question itself. So sometimes when they give us the release state questions, we have to actually do the work and go find one that would align to it. I color-coded this in each standard in your packet so that it would be more helpful for you. I'm going to move on to the next slides, and I would like you guys to keep this piece of paper in front of you because it's going to help you understand what my slides are telling you next. It's also going to allow you to make connections with the release questions I show you. So here we are looking at questions 1 and 3. They're highlighted in blue. I would say they are viewed as our relatively area of strength. If we were looking at them, 90% of the students were able to correctly answer question number 1. And 76% of the students were able to answer the correct answer for number 3. That is vocabulary in determining the meaning of words and things like that. Here's an example of a release test question from 2021 that aligns to the standard. Take a moment to look at it. As you're looking at it, I want to note that yes, question number 24, it aligned to the standard of determining the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in a text, including those that allude to the significant characters found in mythology. It hits that, but questions 1 and 3, those really showed our area of strength. So those were the focus that we are looking at right now. This information shows that the vocabulary in the classroom is working. You guys are doing a wonderful job. The students did well understanding the meaning of target words. So what you're doing in this area connected to that standard, it's working. You're doing awesome and you're helping your students. And I want you to know that throughout this presentation in this PD, I want you to continue to be positive. Sometimes when we hear weaknesses, it's easy to fall back in that negative rut that we were talking about earlier. But I love this quote. It says, build up your weaknesses until they become your strong point. How many of us have once not known something, but after practice and working at it, we achieved it. We mastered that goal. This is what we want from our students. So that's the purpose of today. Now to dive into those weaknesses, where is our areas that we need to work on and how can we fix it? So let's look at questions 2 and 6 that are highlighted in yellow. Those 2 questions are 2-point questions. How do I know that? Well, that's because I looked on the last column. If it has a number there, then that means it has 2-part questions, which generally means there's a part A and there's a part B, like shown on the release question right here. So what I'm guessing here is a couple of things. 1, it could absolutely be standard. And 2, it could simply be that maybe we aren't assessing the standard correctly. So I think a conversation would be beneficial for us to take a look at it. First of all, how are we teaching this standard for mastery? And second of all, how are we assessing the standard? And are we assessing it in a way that will help our students be successful for the state test? With that being said, again, similar to the last one, question number 26 does align to the standard, but it wasn't a 2-point question. Questions 2 and 6 were a 2-part, and that seemed to be where we needed to make it a little stronger for our students. So we need to take a look at that. Are we supporting students in our classroom with this information of the standard that they want us to do? Looking on your color-coordinated page, questions 5 and 22. These questions are highlighted in pink. What's interesting here is I want to spend a little bit of time for us to discuss this. Question 5 and 22. Well, question 5, we had a 93% of students get the question correct. But then, question 22, we only had 58%. It's almost close to a 50-50 split. So what is it exactly that we are struggling with? Is it figurative language? Is it word relationship? Is it nuances? Or word meaning? Then we have to think about that. How are we teaching it? Or what are we using to teach it? Let's talk about that for a little bit as a department, as a group, and as a grade level. Take a few moments. How are you teaching that? And what are we using to teach it? For reference, I have provided you a release test question that would align to it. Moving on to the next question highlighted in white. This only showed up one time. It's a relative area of strength with a 68%. So you're going to want to make a connection between the text and the story, the drama here, right? And then identify where each version reflects specific descriptions. I want to note here that some of you may be wondering, it only showed up once, Rayellen. Why are you talking about it? Well, because we don't want to ignore it. It showed up once for a reason. And who to say that it could show up 6 times in the next test? So I believe that it's worth noting that it showed up one time and it's an area of focus. It's something we need to look at. What's interesting, though, is it showed up one time and the state did not release a question that was similar to it. Therefore, I had to go and I had to look at what the state was looking for when it came to a question like this and the standard. And here, you could take a moment to look at the examples that they provided us. Is this something that seems familiar to you? Go ahead, talk about it for a minute. The question in green shows that our summarizing is weak. That is one of the only ones in which we see this huge, only 16% of our students got that question correct. Question 23 is determining the theme. So how are we teaching the theme? How are we summarizing? That's a question we need to ask ourselves later when we're collaborating. What is your system of summarizing a text? What is your system of figuring out the theme? Because right now we're at 16% and maybe that's not working of how we're teaching it. So what are some strategies that we can think about later that could help us increase that score? Once again, this was only one question that showed up. So there was not a release question from the state test. But I did find that information of examples of what they're looking for. So take a look at it. How are you teaching it? Is it similar to these examples of what they want in the requirements? Or maybe we're not connected well to it, and it's something that we need to look at later on. Now let's look at question 25 in purple. While it only shows up one time, I find it very interesting. This is a two-part standard. So we need to determine which is our weakest area. Is it finding examples or is it drawing inferences? Based on your students' performance in your classroom, take a moment to decide, what do you think? My guess would be, and I would lean towards inferencing if I had to make a guess. But that's just because I've noticed that students sometimes seem to not be able to dig deep into, I think this because making that connection. But that's my inference, right? What do you think? As a group, as a grade level, do you think this our area of weakness could be finding examples? Or do you think it could be drawing inferences? While you're thinking, look at the release test score and, the test question that I provided with you on the slide. Then again, we have another question of number 27 that is in orange, and it is, in fact, a two-part question. I provided two different release questions because I'm unsure which one that they were talking about, but they both could relate to the standard. I think as we look at our two-part questions, we are not even close to the 50% in terms of students getting both parts of that question correct. So I think we need to take a look at what our assessments may look like or how we are teaching that. How can we increase the student stamina for students to be able to answer one question and then be able to answer the next? Because here's the issue. If a student is struggling to answer part one, then part two is going to be really tricky for them. Ideas like this is how we can help students grasp the concept. We need to hone into, is it stamina? Is it the two parts making that connection? Is it comparing and contrasting? If it's comparing and contrasting, what can we do to help support this? Right? This happened because that happened. Is that what we're lacking? But students need to be able to do this. This is seen on the test, and clearly it's a weakness of ours. So it's something that we need to take seriously. So So after breaking all of that apart, the question is, what does the data show us? What it's showing us is the areas that we need to address as a department. Looking at those percentages, what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses? Are we overlapping instruction on certain standards? Are we not teaching test standards though? And then maybe what advances have we made on vocabulary within the classroom, because we did really good on that, right? So what are we doing differently that we didn't do last year or the year before? Because those scores show that you did something great. How can we use that maybe to strengthen other areas? What strategies need to be implemented more in order to improve the future test scores? I want you to think about that for a minute. What is it telling us? I see a lot of you out there smiling. Your wheels are turning. Right? Am I doing that correctly? It's easy to ask ourselves that question. And to support it, I want to help come up with a goal as a district and provide a strategy that can support our weaknesses and support and see if we implement different strategies within the classroom, can we improve those scores? Can we teach to a test but provide strategies that make learning fun and engaging? Can we do that? So as I see you out there smiling, this is a great time to take a second. Take a 10-minute break, use the restroom, get a drink. And maybe take an opportunity to ask me some more questions. I'm here. I'm going to be walking around with a whiteboard. And I'll be writing down any more of those questions that you may have for me. And if I can't figure it out today, I will figure it out for you tomorrow. So please feel free to ask me questions within the 10 minutes, and I will see you back soon. So what is our goal? This data tells us we need to work on reading literary texts. So we need to work on the two-part questions, summarizing the text, and finding examples. I believe the bigger picture here too is comprehension. We have to be able to comprehend to be able to do those two-part questions. We need to be able to comprehend to be able to summarize a text. And we need to be able to comprehend to find those examples that make sense, right? So how can we fix and make that goal successful? What can we do? Well, one instructional strategy to support it is to use a graphic organizer. Interesting. We could support students in the area of two-part questions, summarizing and finding examples with a graphic organizer? How? Well, graphic organizers are a visual graphic display that shows relationship between facts, ideas, and terms within a specific learning task. I'm seeing a lot of you smiling out there because you're like, I just heard her say a lot of those things, right? Facts and ideas. We just talked about making two-part questions well. What are the facts and ideas that connect? Summarizing the text. What are the ideas within? Finding examples. What are the facts, right? She just talked about that. So graphic organizers maybe could help us, right? And based on the state reports, all 3 elementary schools could benefit from this instructional strategy. But it's important to know that we may use the graphic organizers in a different way based on the needs of our students within our school and within our classroom. Now, I think it's important to let you all know that we should use graphic organizers because it's backed by science. And I see a lot of you out there smiling like, oh, science, right? Everything's about science, but it really is. Because we want to make sure we're not wasting our time. We're using something that is beneficial and is going to support us. And With that, I would just like to throw in that these graphic organizers are backed by science, just like the resource-based strategies that we are already using in our classrooms. I know there's a lot of information on here, so just go ahead and take a moment to read how David Ashabel and Jean Piaget back the importance of graphic organizers. This slide just proves that graphic organizers are backed by educational theories that we incorporate already. There are things that there are ideas, some things that we're already using. So the use of a graphic organizer could support that and support those needs that we were talking about earlier. So why use a graphic organizer? Graphic organizers are research-based, just like we just talked about, right? It gives us a purpose. We know that we're not wasting our time. They're considered to help support reading comprehension, so it allows students to stay organized with their thoughts. They display a variety of relationships and structures. This is huge. It allows the information to connect to one another, those two-part questions. Why do they connect? We could ask ourselves that. Graphic organizers allow us to answer it. They are a visual representation of information in the text. This is especially useful for our kids who may need that visual aid. Whether they're on an IEP or not, some students learn best with a visual, and a graphic organizer can do that for us. And graphic organizers activate a reader's knowledge to make connections within a text. That's that aha moment that the students have. Oh my goodness, that happened because, right? They're making that connection. I'm seeing you smile because we've all seen it in our classroom, that smile that the kids give us because they made that aha moment. They're making that connection, and graphic organizers will do that for them. Now, there's different perspectives on this. First, there's the teacher perspective, okay? A teacher perspective is that graphic organizers provide a visual for building a student's prior knowledge with new information that they've already gathered from a reading. For example, it allows students to list the information because events and details can be easily forgotten, especially when reading a long text and when taking a test that they're already nervous, right? It allows them to put the information somewhere. Teachers can create graphic organizers that will help all learners. For example, if you have a student on IEP, it could be simplified. No matter the need. For example, Fire Elementary can easily use a graphic organizer to take their ideas and put them into a writing activity. This would then be helpful, right? The student perspective. It serves as a study and a review tool. It allows students to know why events happen and the details within a story are taking place. Students can be actively involved in their learning process. Everyone, this is huge. It allows students to take control of their own learning, which is important because students have to take a state test and they have to do it by themselves, right? So we need them to take control. We need them to have that confidence piece, to be in control and successfully do something independently. And then finally, it helps guide students to search for answers themselves. It helps them, once again, have that control with purpose. So, how are we going to use a graphic organizer? Well, let's see. First, graphic organizers allow students to become familiar with it. So you need, as a teacher, to get them familiar. We need to emphasize the importance of it because without telling students the importance, they're not going to have drive to want to use it. And without getting them familiar, they're not going to know how to do it and use it independently and successfully for the state test. So what can a teacher do? Teachers can use a graphic organizer one part at a time, right? One part at a time and one graphic organizer at a time. This is the scaffolding approach, right? If students are taught one graphic organizer at a time, they will be able to master it fully instead of touching on it and moving on, just like each section that it holds. If we scaffold each part, they are successful at creating the whole thing on their own. And teachers need to train students to use them to be independent so that they can be self-regulated learners. If we take the time to teach students each component, then their ability to properly use it independently will increase. I want you to take a look here. This is an idea of how teachers could be involved in the learning process, and it's something with the idea of part, whole, or I do, you do approach. For example, if you look at the very top, it talks about the protagonist, the antagonist, and the supporting characters. We'll get students to know what they are. Pro, hero. Antagonist, antagonize, right? Allowing students to know who the characters are and what their purpose is there might be able to connect to the setting and the place, right? If it's an antagonist, it could be in a dark forest. If it's a protagonist, it could be a place like, where there's laws, right? Or in the sky. So by being able to complete one section at a time, it will allow a student to then be able to complete the next section. And then once I do that section, the students can do it on their own. And then we move on to the problem. Well, I did the protagonist, antagonist already, right? So antagonize would maybe connect to the problem. Who's in that problem and where they're at. I would do that, model for my students, and then my students would go and do it. After they've mastered that, we would move to the solution. Protagonist, hero. I would talk to them, give them a mini lesson, and then once they've seen me do it, it's their turn to do it. So they're learning each piece. I do, then you do. They're getting that double factor. Then once they've learned all that top, the bottom becomes so much easier. What's your first event? I do. Well, my first event is this is going to happen. These are the characters in it. This was my story. Now, class, what's yours? What's your first event? Once we've mastered it, we move on to event 2, using all that detail above as well. And then after that, event 3. Step-by-step approach. I do, you do. They see because I'm modeling. And it allows them to have more reinforcements and to successfully be independent. So there's a lot of graphic organizers out there, right? I know a lot of you are smiling like, okay, Ray Ellen, well, now what graphic organizer do you want me to use? That's pretty broad, right? Well, let's bring it down then. Based off your state data, I want to look at 2 in particular graphic organizers. The first one is a cause and effect graphic organizer. This would help with 2-part questions, right? Also, Juniper, when looking at your writing scores here and improving those scores, we could maybe talk about making those connections. This happened, then that happened, right? So you would benefit from that cause and effect to improve your writing scores. Not only that, but you would also benefit from a story map, which would allow you to summarize the text and find examples. By using a graphic organizer and one of these in your classroom that meet the needs of your students, we could hopefully improve that 13% writing score. Because both of these graphic organizers will support your comprehension with literary environment in the literary text. And they both can be simplified depending on your students' needs. So no matter where your students are at, you can adapt them to where they're at and help meet them. Hemlock and Fire, based on our reading literary text scores, Both of these graphic organizers could help your students find detail and connect events within a fiction text. So your data shows that these two particular graphic organizers will support you, especially based off the data that we already talked about. So why should teachers use a graphic organizer, especially the cause and effect graphic organizer? Well, they would help support detail on why something happened within a text. So for example, what was the cause, then what was the effect, right? This happened, so that happened. That would work on your connections, those details. Why did that happen, right? It would help support our weakness when it comes to those two parts. Goldilocks sat on the baby bear's chair. What was the effect by that, right? That A-B question that we were talking about on the state test. It would help students make that connection. This would help for example, why did that happen? What was the detail? Right? And then they could be used for an informative and a narrative text. And that's another huge thing that I love about a graphic organizer of cause and effect. For example, it could talk about the life of an animal. The baby was hungry, so it got milk. Or it could be a fairy tale or a literary text similar to the one I'm showing you here. But the cause and effect graphic organizer shows support and helping increase our data. Now here's an example of a student using the particular cause and effect graphic organizer. I know it's a little blurry on my side. So I provided you all a copy on page 5 in your pamphlet that I gave you in the beginning. So go ahead and look at that. You can see here that a teacher modified it. How did the teacher modify it? Take a moment and try to answer that question for me. How did the teacher modify it? And maybe why? Coming back to me in 3, 2, 1. I heard a lot of you say that you noticed that the teacher modified it and you were thinking maybe it's because they got too comfortable with the cause. Or they got too comfortable with the effect, so that they were able to differentiate by this time you find the cause, then the next time you find the effect, so that they know that the learners are staying up to par with it. This is huge. That's a great idea and example, right? This happened, so that happened. The student was able to do it based off the modifications of what the teacher did. So that's great. This shows, and this is great that it shows that a teacher can modify. You can use something like this, and a student will still be able to output information for you. So based off that positivity, take a moment to discuss with your grade level a learning opportunity that could benefit from this cause and effect graphic organizer. Next, I would like to look at a story map graphic organizer. And why should a teacher use a story map graphic organizer? Well, it's helpful for a narrative text, which will help us with that key detail when writing. Juniper, this would be great for you, right? That key detail. It also calls students' attention to the main elements of a story, such as the character, time, setting, and the plot. So what's happening from the beginning, middle, and end. This will help with our connections and our summarization, which all of us could benefit from. It visually represents key information using a specific structure. Once again, this happened, then that happened. It's that structure that keeps us organized. And it highlights a significant relationship within a story, which will lead to a deeper understanding. That theme, what did we learn? Remember talking about that in the data? So this could support that data point that we were talking about earlier. This could help us. So would this help our weaknesses? Yes, it would, right? Especially those two parts, those summarization and just knowing that key detail. If we look here, it will guide students through the text, which will help them monitor their comprehension. Once again, that beginning, middle, and end. It can be used before reading a passage to activate prior knowledge. I love this, you guys. This is lovely. It engages them. It gets them excited, right? They see something, they're like, ooh, I love it. I like it. It links what students read to their background knowledge structure. It helps them make connections. For example, reading in the beginning, the family didn't have enough food. I can make a connection. Well, one time I read in a story that a family didn't have enough food, so they went to a soup kitchen. I wonder if that's going to happen next in the story. That may not relate to the story at all, right? But they're getting their brains and their wheels turning, right? They're thinking about it. That's what we want. We want them to be a thinker. Readers are thinkers, everyone. Readers are thinkers, and that's what we're wanting them to do. And it develops a purpose for their reading. It's that being engaged part that we were talking about earlier. We want them to have purpose and to fully be engaged. Now here is a story map that I actually use with one of my third grade students. If my third grade student can do this, I know your fourth grade student can do this, and probably even better, right? Take a look to analyze it. I'm going to give you a couple moments because I know that it's a third grade handwriting, but I wanted you to see the authentic of the output that they could do. What I did here is I broke down the graphic organizer by sections. First, my students just did the highlighted section of the event 1. We talked about who, when, and where in that part of our story. We then talked about what they were doing. After the student filled out the graphic organizer, next, we talked about it. He shared his ideas. We scaffolded it because then the next day, he was able to use his graphic organizer to start writing the intro of his story. Why am I showing you this? Because I want to show you that this helped him provide detail and make connections. He took 3 bullets and made a whole page. He did this because he had his ideas mapped out. Who was in his story? Jack and Annie. What were they doing? Watching a movie. If you read the beginning of his story, it says Jack and Annie were home alone. They were staying up late. They were watching Godzilla. So this map allowed them to make it one event to the next by providing detail. And then those little bullets were a nice little summary of what they were going to write. Everything that we're looking to improve on our state data scores. This authentic moment shows you that it is important and it does work. And it can help your students. I see a lot of you out there smiling. I don't know if that's because you're using it or if you want to use it, but that's good. And if you need this resource, I have the outline. You can use it. You can take it. We are teachers. We borrow from one another. That's what we're here for. Take this resource and help yourselves and your students. So before we go, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to use graphic organizers within the classroom. Each school may adapt the graphic organizers differently based on their needs. We talked about Juniper needing that writing. So maybe they're going to adapt just that story map to help map out their ideas from beginning, middle, and end. But others may look for just the connection. Byron may look for that. That's okay. You will all be different. But what's great about it is that we can adapt to the needs of our students, and they give us that ability. I want to challenge you to go back and see which graphic organizer would work best. And then incorporate that schema within your lesson. Allow your students a chance to learn at a pace that's best for them. Because just like this entire presentation today, if I would have told you all this in 5 minutes, you wouldn't have fully understood it. But we took the time to break it apart. We broke all that data apart. Then we gave a purpose. And then we outsourced it to a strategy just like those graphic organizers. We broke it down. We knew the purpose. We wanted to write a story, and then we did it. How awesome is that? That is what we're looking for, people. And this is something that can help us. So it's time to collaborate. I want you to meet with other schools to share your ideas. See what's working for each other. For example, Fiery seems to be working well. So with your writing, so share your writing process. First grade teachers, share your writing process at Fire School. Maybe share with Juniper. They could take some of those ideas and they could input them into their graphic organizers. Work together, see what's working, what's not working. How can we help each other? As you're working and collaborating, I'm going to still be coming around with that whiteboard. I might be asking you questions because I want to make sure you fully understood it. But please don't hesitate to ask me questions. That's why I'm here. I want to help you. I had to learn this way, and I want you to learn that way too, of learning how we could take data and output it into something successful for that brighter future we talked about earlier. So please ask me questions. Once again, if I don't know them today, I will know them tomorrow. And I will support you because I'm here for you. And please know, as I'm walking around with that whiteboard, I will be differentiating with all you students, just like we differentiate with our, I just said you students because you are my students, right? But I will be differentiating with all you schools because that's what we do as teachers. We differentiate. So please feel free to ask me questions that are specific to your school so I can write those ideas down, right? As I roam, I want you to provide me with ideas, and I may provide you with additional thoughts and ideas that match just your school. Because the information we shared today, it gave you some opportunity to have your wheels turning. So don't ask me those questions. My school needs help here. How can you help me? And if we don't have the time today to do that, I am more than willing to help you another time. So I encourage you to please write down my email. Because not only that, but we may think of an idea later on. Oh, I wish I would have asked her, right? So please reach out to me and say, Rayellen, I need help. I need you to come into my classroom, and can you support me using this graphic organizer? Or I would love for you to meet all the first grade teachers within the district to support this so we can fix this and meet that solution that we are working on towards the beginning of our PD. I would love that. Let's work together because then we'll have a brighter future. We're going to then take the time to go into our classrooms and look at the strategies that we learned today. Maybe take the last half hour of the day to discuss with your team where we could implement those strategies to help improve our area of weakness. And then I want you guys to pay attention to your email for a survey. In a couple months, we are going to meet for another PD, and it's going to be an inter-district PD that is going to allow you guys to work with one another again. So the information you provide on my survey will allow me to create a professional development that meets your needs. So please ask me those questions. Put something maybe you thought I didn't do so well in that you would like me to improve on so I can help you. Let's work together. I encourage you to go, please, collaborate, and let's use the strategies in our classroom. I wish you all the best of luck. I will see you in a couple months. Please reach out to me. Please use that survey as a tool. And please know I am here for you. I appreciate you for paying attention to me. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. This PD is over, but I still will be hanging around for the last half hour too. So if your team has any questions, please come see me. I am available for you. Have a wonderful day. And go Vikings.